The Training and Work of an Initiate by Dion. Introduction. Of all those who study the spiritual science that used to be called occult or hidden, but is fast ceasing to deserve that name, not many will ever go on to higher degrees of initiation and aspire after adepthood. We may reasonably ask, if this science is literally esoteric or reserved for the few, whether it's worthwhile for those who can't dedicate their whole lives to its pursuit to study it at all. It cannot be denied that the higher achievements in any pursuit can be obtained only by the man who gives his life to it. Esoteric science is no exception to this rule. Nevertheless, it has a very great deal to give even to those who only touch the hem of its garment. From its teachings there arises a philosophy of life which not only illuminates our profounder problems, but shines on our daily path and reveals significances of which we have never dreamt. It shows us that our individual lives and every happening of those lives is an integral part of the cosmic whole. It shows us our individual relationship to that whole. A knowledge of even the elements of esoteric science leads to a complete change in all our values. We see that things we considered of supreme importance are not the vital points we thought they were. We see that things we did not think mattered at all are the real strategic centers of our lives. Moreover, we find that there are certain powers in our minds not in the least rare or supernatural, for we are using them every day, which, if developed and consciously directed, will produce the most remarkable results. Generally speaking, there's no reason why everybody who's drawn towards the study of occultism should not make a beginning with the use of these powers. Unless deliberately perverted to evil, they can be productive of nothing but good, and the results which they will yield to steady and regular application, even if the time that can be given is no more than a few minutes a day, are amazing in their cumulative effects. It's not everybody who's ready for initiation. It's said that it takes 3 lives of steadfast effort to find the path. But even if we see no likelihood of the goal being achieved in this life, let us remember that everything must have a beginning, and we cannot have a 3rd life of preparation. And we cannot have a 3rd life of achievement until we've had a 1st and a 2nd life of preparation. Even if we have no hope of making this life one of achievement, we can resolve to make it one of preparation. And as time on the inner planes is measured differently from time on the earth plane, it may be that we shall achieve more than we had ever thought was possible. Some things, at least, we shall not fail to achieve, and that right speedily. A new interest in life, an unfailing spring of hope and inspiration, and the ability to straighten out some of life's lesser tangles. Above all, we shall be lifted into a serener air, clean of the accumulated heap of daily pettiness that threatens to bury us. We shall have ceased to wander aimlessly through life, day succeeding day, and bringing us nowhere. The sense of aimlessness will be gone, and we shall have got a key to the problems of existence. The philosophy of the initiates can be brought home to men's business and bosoms, and throws light on many of the dark places of life. The wider its spread among mankind, the better is the purpose of the inner plane hierarchy served. Let no one turn away because they feel they're not ready for it or it's too profound for them. There is something for everyone. Each one can take just as much as he needs and make use of it. That which he has not got, he cannot, of course, make use of. But even that which the smallest cup can carry away is the true water of life. Neither are we obliged to come once and once only to the well. We can return again and again with our pitcher. Therefore let no one despair or be faint-hearted. There's room for all and something for everybody. Part 1. Ethical. Chapter 1. Laying the Foundations. There has always been a widespread belief that some men know more than others, and that instead of sharing certain aspects of their knowledge with their fellow men, as they were willing, nay eager, to do with certain other aspects of it, they kept them sedulously to themselves, or communicated them only to a chosen few, whom they either bound to inviolable secrecy, or permitted to impart the knowledge in their turn only to those who were prepared to assume the same obligations, and who were judged worthy to receive this great privilege. This tradition meets us in the literature of all peoples, in all periods of history, and we find the belief generally held that these secret doctrines concern the inner nature of man and the universe, the aspect that's not observable by the direct action of the five senses, but for whose perception the higher senses have to be brought into play. Further, it was generally believed that a large portion of the secret teaching was concerned with the training of its students to use these higher senses for the purpose of observation, as the student of the physical sciences is trained in laboratory technique and the use of the microscope. It was also held that occult science had its practical aspect, and that the knowledge of its laws conferred power in the subtler worlds, just as knowledge of natural laws conferred power in the dense physical world. That this knowledge was carefully guarded by those who were its custodians was also recognized. And throughout the ages, the same reason for their caution was assigned, that in the wrong hands this power, if abused, could produce serious harm, because men had no right to make use of it for any personal end, since it was derived from the great author of the universe. The men who held it were trustees, not owners, and might not appropriate this sacred power to their own uses without being guilty of a crime against their God and their fellow men. And we have many traditions of the swift and heavy punishment which befell those who thus offended, either at the hands of their fellow initiates or of the higher powers against whom they had sinned. It was also held, however, that although this knowledge was kept so secret that none knew where were its colleges, or libraries, or students, yet if a man by his character and his life rendered himself a worthy recipient, sooner or later he was brought in contact with those who were competent to instruct him, and then he also passed under the ban of secrecy. Literature and history bear universal testimony to the existence of this belief among people in all ages. Many times has this belief been expressed, and as many times contradicted, only to be reasserted in each succeeding generation. That there can be no smoke without fire, and especially such a large volume of smoke as we see here, will be acknowledged by most people. And that this knowledge and method of training do actually exist as an organized system can be vouched by many who have encountered them at first hand. As of old, it's declared that it's only necessary for the student to fit himself for this knowledge, for the mysterious currents that play upon the universe, to bring him in contact with those who can enlighten him. And many can vouch from personal experience that this belief is well-founded. Whomsoever formulates, even subconsciously, a wish to study the higher knowledge, he will be given the opportunity to do so. Life by life, he will be given the training necessary to fit him for its study, until finally, if through all the hard discipline to which he has been subjected, it has still maintained its place in his esteem as the one thing worthwhile, this subconscious wish will work through the consciousness. That which was formless will become articulate, and the man will deliberately take up the quest of the evidence of things not seen. What then can a man do so to cultivate his mind as to be ready for this higher knowledge when it shall come to him? What can he do by way of preliminary training, working as a solitary student, to fit himself for the reception of the knowledge he desires? The student who is not grounded in the elements cannot understand the advanced teaching. He who has no knowledge of arithmetic cannot grasp mathematics. Earn the means first, God surely will contrive use for our earning, said one who himself had trodden the path of knowledge. What can the student do who has not yet found his master? Though many lives before his master must have found him, or he would not have attained the articulation of his wish. What can he do to make the utmost use of the material that lies to his hand, so that when the time of his training shall come, there may be nothing left undone that could be done before, and his progress may be unimpeded by the absence of that necessary groundwork of mental culture which it was in his power to lay while as yet he was without the gate? Much time is spent teaching a man what he ought to have learned in the schoolroom in order to enable him to grasp the import of knowledge of which his initiation makes him free. It's true that, although glorious glimpses are caught by the intuition, unaided by the intellect, much more there is lost from sheer inability on the part of the student to grasp the significance of its opportunity. Infinite things can be perceived by the spiritual intuition, but unless the intellect can be fitted to cooperate, these things can seldom be rendered of practical avail for the solution of world problems. The mystic has his moments of ecstatic emotion, during which he reaches great heights, but he's seldom able to bring back the water from the wells of life for those he has left behind. It's only when each vehicle of consciousness in man is in perfect correlation that the current of inspiration can flow through him and be translated into manifestation in the physical world. And while a man can learn great things and store them in his subconscious mind, it's only during the life in which he has learned to correlate his vehicle so that he can bring the spiritual through into manifestation that he can be of service to his fellow men. I would, therefore, urge those who desire the higher knowledge to set immediately about the task of correlating their vehicles of consciousness, and especially the mental one, so that when the higher knowledge is revealed to them, they may act as links between that which is above and their fellow men, who as yet stand upon a lower step of the great stair. I would urge them, if they need any spur to this effort, to remember how much it would have meant to them when they themselves stood upon that same step, had the help which it will be in their power to give been available. No effort after development is wasted, even if he who strives seems to lose sight of his goal and turn aside. It's the passage of many feet that widens the path for the multitude. We, in our day, will never have to face such trials as did the earlier initiates who broke the way for us. With regard to practical consideration of the problems involved in this correlation of the vehicles of consciousness, it's important that the student should think of his vehicles as something separate from himself, as tools which he uses to carry out his work. For this purpose, he sharpens and cares for them. And the higher the level upon which he can accustom himself to function, the better start he will have when his opportunity presents itself. Few enlightened people identify themselves with their physical bodies, but many can live in their emotions. Some can think freely and coherently upon concrete subjects, but only few can reason in terms of the abstract. And only one or two in a generation can experience the intuitions of the spiritual plane in such a way as to be able to think in terms of inceptive and unmanifest thought. Initiates of occult sciences are taught to function upon these different levels, to use a terminology derived from the East. Or, to express the same idea in Western words, to think in these different ways. Before we're ripe for a master's teaching, we have to conquer the physical and emotional levels for ourselves. For to this stage, the normal state of evolution enables us to develop without external interference. We must render the body an absolute servant, which has no longer the power to make its needs imperative. It's to this end that much of the extreme asceticism of the yoga methods of India is directed. We of the West, however, don't practice those methods. It's enough that the body should be rendered a voluntary collaborator and not an abject slave. When a man directs his goals towards a higher level, they will automatically lift him there. And as a great initiate said, as a man thinks in his heart, so he is. Emotions must flow freely, without conflict or distortion, in the channels which nature has appointed for them, before they can be lifted to a higher level. You cannot sublimate a pathology. The direction of the energies of life must be removed from the domain of desires to that of will. Until this is done, there can be no steady progression in any direction. For the desires are called forth from without, not directed from within, and vary with the external stimulus. Let us now consider the culture of mind in preparation for occult training. It must be remembered that there are two distinct levels of mind, the region of concrete thought and the region of abstract thought, and each of these requires culture. To a man who's accustomed to think in nothing but concrete forms, the abstract appears meaningless when first he comes in contact with it. Its terms evoke no corresponding image in his consciousness, but are just so many words to him, and it's necessary to habituate the mind to think in ideas instead of images. One of the readiest ways to do this is the study of algebra, for here the mind is forced into an elementary type of abstract thought, and acquires the habit of thinking of proportions apart from things. From this point, advance may be made to the study of philosophy and metaphysics, and a good introduction to this study is Herbert Spencer's First Principles. With regard to the level of concrete thinking, we can do much by way of preparation for the higher training. The field before us is wide, so wide that it would be difficult to extend our studies beyond the bounds of usefulness. The larger the sphere of our knowledge, the more numerous the points of contact with the cosmos. The student who wishes to acquire knowledge direct from the cosmic mind proceeds in much the same way as a patient who's submitting to psychoanalysis. Only in this case, his attention is directed outward, not inward. He starts with an idea in his own mind and follows the chain of associated ideas until he reaches the root complex in the cosmic consciousness. So it will be seen clearly that unless he has a starting point in his own consciousness, some clear-cut idea fairly intimately connected with the subject of study, he cannot begin to wind in the links of the association chain as so to draw the root complex within the field of his consciousness. The good occult student should have a sound general knowledge of natural science, history, mathematics, and philosophy. He cannot, naturally, have a thorough knowledge of all these subjects, but he should know their outlines. He should be familiar with the principles of all sciences and know these methods of philosophy. Then, when he acquires special knowledge, he'll be able to see it in relation to the cosmic scheme of which it forms a part, and hence will know it in a very different way from the man who perceives it as apart from its environment. The one has the living plant in the garden under his observation. The other has the dried specimen in the herbarium. The relativity of knowledge has long been realized, but the unity of knowledge has not yet received justice. Although a man can only excel by specialization, it's essential that he should have a background against which he can see knowledge in his perspective. For the occult student, there's another reason for this framework of general information. In seeking to study by contacting the cosmic mind, He will often gain access to a mass of miscellaneous ideas, but will frequently let slip a piece of priceless information for lack of realization of its worth. Or bewildered by an unfamiliar terminology, he may not grasp the import of what he's learning. The professors of a university are not willing to ground students in the elements of knowledge that belong to the schoolroom. And when the student wishes to undertake the higher studies of esoteric science, he should come as completely equipped as exoteric studies can make him. Chapter 2: The Way of Initiation. The great majority of our fellow men are willing to take the world as they find it, and so long as it does not treat them too hardly, they're content. Others, however, question what lies behind the world as they see it, and until they learn the answer to that question, suffer from the divine discontent which has forever urged men to seek beyond the skyline where the strange roads go down. Most men are also inclined to take for granted the inevitableness of suffering, and unless they're brought into personal contact with some flagrant case, or are themselves the victims, they offer no protest. Others, however, seem to be so linked with the human race that they suffer with the suffering of humanity, and cannot accept happiness or peace for themselves while they're in grief or pain. In the older days, such natures were few and far between, but now they're very many, and none who are observers of this mankind can fail to be struck with this sense of fellowship with all things, which is becoming increasingly common among us. When we consider these two types in relation to the problem of evolution, we can see that they react to it differently, yet the result of their attitude is fundamentally the same. The one type seeks to improve upon evolution by the application of science, so as to hasten the slow processes of nature. The other seeks to lessen the suffering which the working out of nature's plan entails. And both seek knowledge in order that they may be more efficiently able to serve their fellow men. If we study the lives and writings of these men and women who sought to know, not merely for the sake of knowledge, but in order to apply that knowledge to the relief of human suffering, we shall be struck by the fact that these lives have many things in common, factors which mark them off from the lives of eminent men of other types. They usually have, from early childhood, a sense of some work which they are to do. Sooner or later, they find this work and never falter in their devotion to it. And thirdly, whether they are agnostics or believers, we seldom find atheists in their rankings, they have a sense of being in contact with something higher than themselves, which uses them as instruments for the service of their fellows. And we also see that these people, though often frail of body, must possess an almost superhuman power of endurance when in the service of this power, and that they invariably ascribe their strength to a source outside of themselves. We cannot fail to be struck by the fact that all of these men and women, whatever is their particular piece of work they're embarked upon, look upon life from the same standpoint, that of universal sympathy. We notice, moreover, if we observe them closely, that some, though not all, have tricks of phraseology in common, which indicates that they're familiar with some subject which has a terminology a little out of the ordinary, and that, although this subject is never directly referred to, its phraseology has influenced their literary style and unconsciously creeps into their writings. We see then that these workers for humanity had, one and all, community of character, and that some must also have had community of study. We also see, one and all, they're no longer content to be borne along the slow tide of natural evolution, but have commenced to swim. Self-consciousness has transcended the blind urge towards other things, and they dimly sense their goal. As it's said, a thirsty horse will sense the presence of water afar off. And finally, we notice that from afar off comes the response, and some power, such as material science takes no cognizance of, seems to cooperate with their efforts, to guide them in doubt and to support them in difficulties. The history of these individuals gives weight to the claim that this contact with something greater than themselves is no figment of an overwrought imagination, for they've achieved what men have seldom achieved, and with frail bodies endured what would have availed to break down even the strongest. What is this power that great souls contact? Esoteric tradition affirms that they take initiation of one kind or another. For there are two kinds, physical and non-physical, which are usually taken together, though sometimes only one and not the other is experienced. The physical initiation admits to the study of the esoteric wisdom acquired by generations of men who sought beneath the surface of existence, who sought the inner meaning of things rather than the outer forms. It admits the student to the fellowship and confidence of these men, and disposes them to share their knowledge and to accept the initiate as a co-worker or pupil. The second form of initiation is declared to be a spiritual experience, wherein the soul establishes contact with the higher powers and is admitted to the fellowship of great souls on the inner planes. Of these two forms of initiation, sometimes one and sometimes another comes first. Sometimes the physical, the lesser initiation, is the earlier, and the student is then taught how to prepare himself for the spiritual experience. In other cases, the spiritual initiation comes first, and then the student is shortly afterwards placed in a way of taking the physical initiation if he so desires. But esotericists are all agreed that although individuals may not necessarily take both initiations, the one always carries with it the opportunity for the other. How is it, we may ask ourselves, that any individual should come to step out of the march of evolution? We notice, in the first place, that it's only men of advanced character who take this step. What is it that causes this abnormal development of character? Esoteric science has its traditional explanation of this problem also. It begins by premising that the evolution in which we find ourselves taking part is not unique, but was preceded by other evolutions and will be succeeded still by others. It also declares that evolution is not a blind, mechanical, material process, explicable in terms of physics and chemistry, but is essentially a mental process, a coming into manifestation, the embodying in concrete form an idea of the divine mind. Esoteric science further declares that the subjects of this evolution can bear a part and aid in the work. For as soon as we become conscious of an idea the divine mind is expressing, we ourselves are expressing it. We've given it a concrete form and embodied it in our lives, and so have ourselves taken up the work of evolution. We're consciously cooperating with God, for it's seldom that anyone who has achieved to the realization of the greater purpose remains passive. This great idea fructifies within him so vigorously that he's compelled to colonize mentally, as a vigorous nation colonizes physically. We take spiritual initiation when we become conscious of the divine within us, and thereby contact the divine without us. It's well known that like attracts like, and that sooner or later we tend to drift into the society of our fellows. Especially is this true for those who have contacted the divine, the great mental currents which play through the cosmos. Just as the inevitable magnetic currents play around the earth, bear him to his appropriate place. This is why esoteric science never goes out to seek its pupils. It knows that its pupils will come to it. We never see occult lodges advertised on the hoardings, but we do feel the setting in of a current in men's minds. What are the ways whereby a man reaches the point when he's ripe for this deep spiritual experience? We've seen that it's a particular type of character that takes initiation. How is that character acquired? Esoteric science gives the explanation under the doctrine of reincarnation, the theory that the immortal soul takes many bodies, acquiring experience and character growth in each, discarding each as its use is fulfilled and taking a new one for new work. Esoteric science always thinks in terms of an evolution, whereas the ordinary man thinks in terms of an incarnation, a single life. This difference of viewpoint fundamentally influences their attitudes towards life. To one, death is the end of all. To the other, it's the end of a phase. To the one, it's a cataclysm. To the other, a sunset. If, in the course of the long ages of evolution, a soul shows educability and capacity to profit by the fruits of experience beyond its fellows, those great intelligences, the product of earlier evolutions, who are consciously cooperating with the divine mind in concreting the abstract idea of good, just as we ourselves do when we become self-conscious of the divine. These intelligences pick that individual out from the generality of his fellows, and give him special tuition, not for his own benefit, but because they see in him a future co-worker. The more of these co-workers with the divine there are to leave in the inert mass of evolving life, the quicker and sooner will be the progress of evolution. Esoteric tradition declares that as soon as a mind is sufficiently advanced to be able to grasp its significance, it's made aware of the esoteric theory of evolution so that, knowing the plan, it may be able to cooperate with the work. But long before the individual is ripe for the conscious realization of this great task, his mind is being schooled and prepared in readiness. This training goes on for several incarnations before the realization of the process to which he's being submitted works through into his consciousness and the individual takes up the work on his own account. If the record of the past lives of such an individual be recovered by means of certain methods known to esoteric science, the process of training can be plainly seen. The lives show a distinct type of experience. Their course is much more adventurous than that of their fellows. Into a few short lives are packed many adventures. Training also is harder, but with the heavier burden there's also greater strength. Life by life, this concentration of experience goes forward until the individual is finally brought in touch with the chance of physical initiation, usually into some minor degree, yet into a position which acts as a starting point of opportunity. One is struck, in looking over these records, by the fact that the individual frequently becomes attached to a temple or some other center of esoteric knowledge in a menial capacity, as a cleaner, a craftsman, or one employed in the routine of the ritual. The inner teaching never seems to be given on the occasion of first contact with esotericism. The ritual, the outer form, is the first thing with which we make our acquaintance. But enough is seen to arouse curiosity, and if a man can once be stimulated to ask a question, it proves its readiness for the answer. If we trace the record of this individual, we see him advancing and receding as the waves of the sea according to the use made of opportunities. But if he's to make good and become one of the greater initiates, advancing steadily through all setbacks as does the tide, and working his way gradually into the deeper knowledge, in incarnation after incarnation, taking his initiation into the mysteries of his time and race, and using the experiences gained in each life as a starting point for the next. It's interesting to note that what's acquired is never lost. Capacity remains, although memory disappears. That which has been learned is stored in the subconscious mind and goes to the formation of character. In each life, we quickly recapitulate the progress we've made in previous lives until we come to the point where we left off. Then we begin the laborious process of acquiring the new. This fact accounts for the rapid progress made by some, while others slowly toil their way up. But let it be remembered that the piece of road over which we so painfully struggle today, we shall rapidly recapitulate when the tomorrow of a new incarnation dawns. Let us now consider what happens in our present life if we followed this road in the past. To begin with, we recapitulate. As soon as we begin to think for ourselves, we arrive at the mental state we were in when we left off. Though we've not yet got the actual data on which to base our opinions, yet we find our minds possessed by certain foregone conclusions which, to those who do not look upon the things from our point of view, seem to be crazy, seem to be reasonless prejudices, and yet which are so much a part of our deeper selves that no evidence or argument serves to move them. We know in the same way that we know we have hands and feet, because this knowledge has been ground into us by centuries of experience, and the pressure of a single life is insufficient to force us out of these deep-scored ruts. Thus it is that a man can go through life finding no sympathy or support for his views, and yet remain unshaken. But sooner or later, though it may not be until the point of death, he will be drawn into the company of his fellows. These ideas seem to be inherent in the mind, so early are they recovered, and every scrap of information bearing on the subject sticks in the memory as if it were endowed with some peculiar fascination of its own. We all no doubt recall the reading of many novels, the memory of whose plots have completely passed away, and yet some chance reference to the mysteries has stayed in the mind. All studies of this nature come easy to the student, for he's in reality not learning anew, but revising. He's not introducing ideas into his mind for the first time, but recalling to consciousness that which is lying dormant in the subconscious mind. It seems as if much of our subconscious mind carried on from incarnation to incarnation. It's the conscious mind only that we build again and again with each life. The student will often recover from his subconsciousness many memories of things he's learned in the past, and these he may be inclined to look upon as of the nature of revelations. So foreign are they to his normal consciousness. It's unlikely, however, that the student at this stage of his career would be reading from the Akashic records. He's much more likely to be exploring the depths of his own subconscious mind, whose wealth is far greater than he suspected. This tapping of the subconsciousness may be mistaken by the student for external aid and teaching, and because this error is common, it must not be thought that the aid is never available. It's indeed ever present, and its availability depends solely upon our power to avail ourselves of it. External aid always comes to the student who has advanced sufficiently far to be benefited by it, and many will relate how apparent chance played into their hands so repeatedly that they could no longer look upon it as unmotived. It must be remembered, however, in this connection, that the power of the mind over circumstances is very great, and we must not make the mistake of looking without until we've looked within. We can, moreover, do much to bring about that which we desire by realizing the power of the mind. The potency of a clearly formulated and long-continued wish is difficult to overrate. So the earnest desire goes forth in search of the master, and it has not far to seek. If the student is worthy, he will presently be rewarded either by the inner knowledge that he's achieved this mental contact, or he will find that chance has placed him in touch with a source of occult information and training, and his conscious work has commenced. The gate is open. It's for him to tread the path. Chapter 3. Preparation for Initiation. It's the aim of initiation to bring about the illumination of the soul by the inner light. Therefore, before embarking upon a consideration of the best means of preparation for that undertaking, it's necessary to explain what is meant by initiation, for so many different concepts are current. The word initiate, as used in these pages, means one in whom the higher self, the individuality, has coalesced with the personality and actually entered into incarnation in the physical body. An initiate, therefore, is one whose higher self it is that looks out at us through his eyes. The personality is reduced to a set of habit complexes of living, leaving the higher self free to carry on its work with the minimal demands upon its attention from the physical plane. This great initiation is invariably gone through out of the body. No ritual confers it, though ritual may have been, and in the Western Hemisphere usually is, employed in order to train consciousness in preparation for this transcendent experience. It's also gone through in full consciousness, and the memory is retained. We're often asked if it's possible to be initiated without knowing it. To this question, we return an emphatic negative. On the face of it, it's absurd to think that we could be unconscious of receiving permanent extension of consciousness. It frequently happens, however, that a master has accepted someone as his pupil without that person being immediately aware of it, owing to the underdeveloped state of his psychic faculties, and realization dawns only after the training has progressed a certain distance. In such a case, a psychic would be able to inform such a person that he has indeed found acceptance as a pupil of the Great White Brotherhood, and has set foot on the path that leads to initiation. But he would be wrong in saying that he's been initiated. The sigil of the master is stamped on the aura of the pupil when he is accepted, and it shines forth to clairvoyant sight as a disc some 6 inches in diameter immediately over the head, the disc being colored according to the ray on which the master is working. When the pupil is entrusted with work to perform for the master on the mundane plane, the corresponding band of color in the aura lights up, showing that the master's power is functioning through the pupil. But it's not until this aura as a whole is illuminated that a man is an initiate, as the term is used here. This only takes place when he shines with his own light, not the borrowed light of his master. Therefore, it's that initiation must be justly referred to as the dawning of the inner light, or coming into manifestation on the physical plane of the agoides, or body of light. The moon may be taken to represent the personality, waxing and waning through innumerable incarnatory phases of reflection of the sun's light or its deflection by the earth's shadow. Whereas the higher self, the immortal spirit in man, is rightly symbolized by the sun, which shines perpetually in the heavens, whether we see it or not. These glyphs will repay meditation. The higher self comes into manifestation in the physical body when initiation takes place. We have only to consider the vast difference between the individuality and the personality in the average man to realize the immense amount of preparation that must take place before such a manifestation is possible. Moreover, we cannot fail to see that if manifestation were attempted before due preparation had been made, the incoming self would find so great a disparity between self and its venture that, like a badly fitting garment, the vesture would be split asunder by the attempt to wear it. This is an occurrence sometimes observed among occultists and accounts for many of the problems of occult fraternities. Before it's possible for the higher self to manifest through brain consciousness, the personality must be turned by the same key as the individuality. Individuality carries on its existence in the spiritual spheres, just as the personality carries on its existence in the mundane spheres. The actions of the former are determined by its desire to maintain harmony with the divine life of the cosmos, whence it draws its being. And the actions of the personality are determined by its desire to maintain harmony with the world of matter, whence the life of the body draws its being. It's obvious, therefore, that the personality will have entirely to reorient its standpoint before it can come into line with the higher self. We must be prepared to shift the basis of all our motives if we want to receive initiation. This requires singleness of purpose that balks at no sacrifice. "Sell all thou hast and follow me," said the Master. And again, "Let the dead bury their dead, follow thou me." These are hard sayings, but experience proves them to be true. There is no reason why anyone should offer themselves as a candidate for initiation, for they can achieve the goal of divine union by the winding path of evolution. But on the other hand, They must not declare that the ancient secrets have been lost, because they, not willing to pay the price, have not received the great pearl. The personality and the things of the senses have to be sacrificed in order that the higher self may manifest. There can be no dispute at this point. All initiates have declared it to be so. We were inclined to think that, having sacrificed the personality, we shall be bereft of all things. This is because the mind of the West still clings to its habit of believing that the death of the body ends existence. So we believe subconsciously that the death of personality ends enjoyment of the fullness of life. We forget that the merchant who sold all he had was able to purchase the great pearl. True, he had realized all his assets, but they were reinvested into something of far greater value. The gospel story implies that he bore off the pearl in triumph. So it is with us if we make the sacrifice of things of the senses that permits of the incarnation of the higher self into the physical body. There's a period of struggle as the threads that bind us to the desires of the senses are snapped. But as soon as an appreciable clearance has been made, the higher light begins to dawn. We are not left long comfortless. Halts by me that football is my gloom after all. Shade of his hand outstretched caressingly? While consciousness is focused in the personality, we cannot contact realities direct, but can only see their reflections in the world of form. The call of the higher life is to arise and turn away from the mirror of form consciousness and look straight at reality, which is life, not form. It's this turning around that constitutes the soul's task when it seeks initiation. As the personality is brought gradually into subjection to the higher self, the inner light begins to irradiate it. The sudden burst of illumination is rare and proves blinding and disabling, as St. Paul found out upon the road to Damascus. Therefore, it's permitted only in the case of very advanced souls who've been trained to a high degree in previous lives and have reincarnated with this end in view, building their personalities accordingly. For the rest of the seekers after initiation, the inner light dawns gently and gradually, with many cloud shadows obscuring it from time to time as the desires of the senses surge up again and again after they were believed to be overcome. Having achieved this freedom from the bondage of the senses, two paths now lie open to the initiate. He may follow the mystic path and go on to liberation, or he may follow the occult path and return into the world of men equipped with the powers of the higher mind. It'll be noted that mysticism does not teach reincarnation, whereas occultism does, and for this reason that the mystic aims at escaping from the bondage of the flesh, never to return, whereas the occultist designs to return to matter, bearing with him the fruits of his labors. Both are legitimate and justifiable ideals. The mystic, who goes on to take his freedom, does not cease to be an influence in the world. By his achievements, he works out a portion of the world's karma. That's why mystics invariably indulge in mortification long after any personal desires of the flesh have been purged away. They're abreacting to the world's karma. The occultist, on the other hand, indulges only in sufficient mortification of flesh to bring it into subjection, and teaches it to obey the sovereign will without murmuring. His design it is to build himself such a personality that his higher self can function through it without let or hindrance. It must be like a powerful and spirited horse that answers instantly to the heel and rein, needing neither spur nor curb. Its senses do not mislead him. Its passions do not blind him. He uses it as a transparent window of the soul that does not distort his view. The mystic renders his personality negative in order that he may be a channel for the cosmic forces. Be still and know that I am God, is his attitude towards all the problems he's called upon to solve. He becomes still upon the mundane plane and allows the spiritual powers to find a channel into the group mind through his meditations. The occultist, on the other hand, deals with forms and uses his concrete mind in order to shape those forms into channels for the cosmic forces. The mystic works in the higher self exclusively. The occultist brings the higher self into manifestation on the planes of form. The mystic, having achieved liberation from the bondage of the senses, is content with the experiences of inner consciousness. He does not seek to bring them into manifestation on the plane of the earth. The occultist, on the other hand, having won to the same realization as that which the mystic desires, endeavors to bring about the reflection on the plane of form of the state of consciousness to which he has won. He does this, if he be a brother of the right-hand path, because it's necessary for the great plan that certain ideals should be worked out in the world of form, but he never does it for the gratification of the senses. That is the test by which our Lord was tested in the wilderness. Command these stones that they be made bread. He was both occultist and mystic, as was shown by such miracles as the turning of water into wine and the passage through closed doors. But he never used his occult powers save in the service of his mission. And it will be noted that, as he advanced towards his final achievement, he used them less and less. The great majority of liberated souls elect to follow the mystic path, thus going beyond our earth sphere. It's only a few of those who've won their freedom who choose to sacrifice it to return again to the world of form, for they have no desires of the sense to draw them back into incarnation. To them, it's rather an incarceration. They are motived solely by the desire to lift the burden of the world's confusion. On the other hand, it must not be thought that the mystic deserts the world when he forsakes it. His prayers are ever with it, and it's this great body of praying souls that lifts the burden of the world's karma of the inner planes. The mystic serves in one way and the occultist in another. Both are necessary to the cosmic task of regeneration and evolution. There can be no function save by this duality, the interaction of the positive and negative aspects of the same force. The mystic is at one pole of the Christ force, and the occultist at the other. Obeying the well-known occult law of the alternation of polarity upon the planes, the mystic is negative on the planes of form and positive upon the planes of force, whereas the occultist is positive upon the planes of form and negative upon the planes of force. Therefore, he has always to invoke forces to aid him in his work, employing for this purpose ritual magic in its various types, from the simple invocation made with a sign to the elaborate forms performed in lodges. The truest development, and the one aimed at by the disciplines given in the Society of Inner Light, is achieved through a just balance of the positive and negative forces of the soul held in equilibrium by the will, so that the judgment can turn the balance in either direction. The soul that's naturally inclined to mysticism is therefore in the lesser mysteries always given an occult training, and the soul which is naturally inclined to occultism is made to work upon mystic lines. It's not until the greater mysteries are reached that the soul is permitted to follow its natural bend and is given the training specially adapted to its capacities. The reason for this apparent violence to nature will readily be seen. If a soul, already inclined towards mysticism, is developed solely on the mystical lines, it's apt to acquire that painful lack of balance so often seen among those who dwell much in the unseen. Its grip on the planes of form does not keep pace with its contact with the planes of force. Therefore, the forces break the bounds of form and are diffused into a bog of emotional spirituality and lost and wasted, like the waters of a river that has broken its banks and made a marshland of the valley. That marsh will produce a lush vegetation, but it's neither land nor water, and is useless for all practical purposes of human service. The occultist, on the other hand, if permitted at the outset of his training to indulge his love for form and intellectualization, will become walled up inside his forms and lose the living contacts which alone give life to the symbols of occultism. If, however, he be set for his discipline the task of contacting forces by purely intuitional and meditative methods, he will acquire the power to make his contacts independently of the use of formulae and ritual magic, Then, when at a more advanced stage of his training, he is taught the traditional methods of the occult arts, he will bring through infinitely more power than the initiate who has not been so trained. It's vital to all occult training that the student should understand the principles of occultism and not use his formulae blindly or superstitiously. A chain is no stronger than its weakest link. Neither mystic nor occultist will be able to bring through into the plane of manifestation more than they're able to polarize within their own natures. Chapter 4. The Path of the Hearth Fire. To many, the first knowledge of the existence of the way of initiation and the masters who summon chosen souls to their service comes as a revelation and a trumpet call. No arguments are needed to convince them, their whole soul rises up in response. The sacrifices and disciplines of the path have no terrors for them. All they pray is for opportunity. But in very many cases, these souls are not free to take the opportunity that offers. They're bound by the chains of duty or of circumstance. Unless they're prepared to disregard the rights and welfare of others, they cannot set foot upon the path. Is it to be considered right to sacrifice others to the service of the masters? Which is the higher duty, the service of the masters or the service of the family and home? This is a big question, and one that's constantly recurring, and its answer is not as simple as some would have us think. When a soul thus spontaneously answers the call of the path, it's obvious that it's not hearing it for the first time. In past lives, it has passed within the veil of the temple, and the memory is latent in the subconscious mind. This being the case, why should it be that when the call comes in this life, it should not be free to follow it without breaking faith and neglecting sacred ties? It's to the law of karma that we have to look for an answer to this question. There must be something in the karma that has to be worked out before that soul is ready for the path. And the bonds of obligations are laid upon it in order that they may be its discipline. The way which such a soul is destined to follow is known as the path of the hearth fire, and is as true a way of initiation as any of the disciples imposed by the occult fraternities. Neither is it a quicker or slower way of initiation than any other. A builder may spend much time in gathering together the materials of the house he intends to build. He may fashion those materials section by section and spend days and weeks at the work, and yet no wall begins to rise. Then, after much careful and accurate work, he comes to the stage when he's ready to assemble the parts he has so laboriously structured. And in a few hours, the perfectly matched sections are bolted together and the structure is up. So it is with the preparation for initiation. The candidate may spend long years in the preliminary training, disciplining mind and body, learning all the lessons of life, loosening his hold on the desires and dreams of matter, and patiently waiting for the longed-for admission to the mysteries. And then, after the long and weary task has been fulfilled, and he comes, perhaps in the evening of his days, to the opportunity so long foregone, he will find that the weary years of patient bearing of burdens have taken his consciousness through many degrees of discipline and initiation, and that when he comes to the mysteries, he will pass rapidly through the outer court and find himself admitted to the temple. If life has taught him the lessons of occult discipline, the lesser initiator has no need to teach them to him, but, having tested him to prove his experience, vouches for him to the great initiator. A certain stage of experience has got to be reached before we're ready for initiation. The bonds of the senses must have begun to loosen of their own accord before we're ready for the great renunciation of a personal sense of life. There are three great initiators who bring us to the altar of the mysteries. The great initiator, who is the master, the lesser initiator, who is the teacher, and our own higher self, which trains us by means of the lessons of life and the realizations they bring. The discipline of the path cannot be learnt from books. It's experience alone which brings realization. Let us therefore accept our karma as the first initiation. Let us strive for a mastery of ourselves and our circumstances, which shall give us serenity under all conditions. What cannot be cured must be endured. This is the first lesson which karma teaches. The adept is a man of unruffled serenity, for he's a man of perfect self-control. Let us strive for mastery of the inner astral kingdom of the emotions. Once we've acquired this, we have the key of the astral plane in our hand, ready for the next time when the initiator shall bring us to the door. On the other hand, it's our bounden duty as knights of God to resist injustice and enforce the law of harmony in whatever sphere it may please God to place us. Whatsoever thy hand findeth to do, do it with all thy might. What can be cured should not be endured if human courage and ingenuity can mend it. We should neither sit supinely down under remediable evil, nor keep up a perpetual whine about the irremediable. We should either accept willingly and cheerfully, or reject courageously and determinedly. If we live our daily life according to the cosmic principles, we shall work out whatever karma has been given to us for our portion in this incarnation and win our freedom. Out of the experience thus gained comes the preparation of the soul and rapid advancement in the mysteries when once the right of entrance has been gained. There are several causes which bind us in chains of duty to personalities and to the humdrum task of life when our whole soul desires to serve the masters and combat spiritual wickedness in high places. We may have failed in certain of our tests in a past life and therefore have to take those tests over again. We can see examples of this around us every day. A student may have taken all of the subjects of his degree with brilliance, but because he has failed in one of the subjects of a preliminary examination, may not be entitled to his certificate. He has to sit for the preliminary work again, and may possibly fail repeatedly before some elementary paper in mathematics or languages is properly worked. So it's often with the soul in which we see the lofty aspirations, but who is yet bound to mundane duties. That soul, in all probability, is completing some of the elementary lessons so essential to success in the tasks of applied occultism. As soon as these tests are passed, he will be eligible for the degree whose higher work he has already completed. Again, it sometimes happens that souls which have advanced far into the mysteries turn back at the call of human love and forge anew the chains of karmic ties. In subsequent lives, the debts thus incurred must be discharged. Sometimes the turning aside is motivated by the passions and the senses. Sometimes a higher motive determines the choice, and out of pure pity, a soul that is traveling fast may turn back to hold out a hand to a beloved one who is progressing more slowly. It's seldom possible to judge of the wisdom of a decision taken in a past life, but its obligations remain to be met. And if the choice of pity and patience has been made, it must be abided by cheerfully and willingly if its good karma is to be reaped. It's not enough, however, to recognize that a bondage to the duties of the home may be a karmic debt, nor yet to realize that it indeed is the path to light. If the home is to become a temple of initiation for the soul, its duties must be worked as a ritual. As long as we hate the humble duties of the home, even if we perform them faithfully, that home cannot be a temple. And if we perform them badly, we fail to initiate, quote unquote. And that, as every student of occultism knows, is a very serious thing for the candidate. In order to make the home a temple of initiation for the soul, its duties must be dominated by two ideals: love and beauty. Its services must be rendered with sympathy and joy, and we must make its humblest details beautiful. Even in the barest room, there's a beauty of perfect cleanliness and order. If we would merely eliminate the superfluous from our homes and keep what remains in perfect order, we should have achieved true beauty, as many a bare convent refectory can show. If our home problems prove very difficult, let us, in imagination, always put a chair at the fireside and lay a place at the table for the unseen guest, and live our life and do our work in the light of that invisible presence. If we rule our homes in a spirit of selfless love and serenity of heart, asking no return, but doing our duty for the sake of the need of those to whom we minister, our house will be a true temple of the hearth fire in which we can receive our initiation. But let it be remembered that the serenity of heart must be there as well as the faithful performance of duty. It's this serenity which is the proof of karma overcome. As long as we're kicking against the pricks, we still have something to learn of our circumstances. Let us try to keep our homes always in readiness for the coming of the wayfaring Christ, who, as the old story has it, goes up and down among men, saying, "The foxes of the earth have holes, and the birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has not where to lay his head." For his coming, it's not enough that the house should be swept and garnished. The spirit of the home must blossom on the hearth in peace and goodwill, and above all, in serenity, which is the true keynote of the home. Chapter 5. The Initiate's Ideal. When we speak of the path, we mean much more than a course of study. The path is a way of life, and on it the whole being must cooperate if the heights are to be won. When the seeker awakes to the possibilities of initiation and sets out on his quest of the great initiator, he will not be long before he finds someone who's willing to direct him, and his perplexity as to the direction of his search will be exchanged for anxiety as to the right choice of a guide. We cannot remind our readers too often that the great initiator comes in the silence to the higher consciousness, and is never a human being, however supernatural and secluded. All that can be done by the servants of the masters on the physical plane is the preparation of the candidate. It may be of value, however, to indicate the type of character which is necessary to develop in order that the seeker may be accepted as a neophyte in the temple of the mysteries. That temple not built with hands, eternal in the heavens. The discipline of the path in its earlier stages is directed primarily to the production of a definite type of character. Whatever variations of intellectual quality and caliber there may be, the character type is constant. It's the first thing that impresses one in meeting those who may justly be reckoned as initiates. There is a simplicity of life and a serenity of demeanor. The initiate is entirely unperturbed amid catastrophe and horror. He possesses many of the qualities of a traveler in wild lands, especially an ability to arrive right side up and smiling in the most surprising circumstances. He's equally contented and at ease in the humblest cottage and the most imposing and ceremonious surroundings. This harmonized, free-moving poise is the inevitable result of the discipline to which he subjects himself, for he learns to control of emotion and desirelessness. It's not easy to upset the equanimity of a man who's achieved these qualities. He loves simplicity, cleanliness, and quiet, but if he cannot obtain them, he walls himself up in a shell of his own thoughts and maintains his equanimity undisturbed. It's not easy for him to hide his light under a bushel, for the discipline he's undergone has put its mark upon him, and people feel that he's a man of power. Withdrawn and remote, even in easy social intercourse. The true initiate, however, never makes himself conspicuous by eccentricities. He desires to avoid the attention of the outside world and to come and go about his affairs as unobtrusively as possible. The long black cloak, the flamboyant hat, the mysterious jewel are never sported by the true student of the sacred science. It's the charlatan who seeks to attract attention to himself. The adept, the man who's achieved the heights, is serene. Sensitive he must be, owing to the work he does, but with that sensitivity goes the knowledge and discipline that can control it. If he cannot defend his sensitivity by the appropriate means, he will not last upon the stormy path of occultism. The occultist who is a bundle of nerves has gone wrong somewhere in the course of his work. The pursuit of occultism no more necessarily produces ill health than the pursuit of athletics, though in both cases demands are made on the stamina, and if there are any latent weaknesses they will be found out, and unless they can be corrected, their victim will have to give up the idea of training. One would hardly have thought it necessary to point out that any system of training which produces physical debility and mental unbalance must be on wrong lines. But there are certain well-known systems which do these things with such regularity that their adherents accept them as part of the path. It's been my experience that those who may justly be reckoned as among the more advanced students of the occult, and especially such as are expert in its practice, are possessed of unusual bodily strength and wide culture, and are skillful in the use of their hands. The hand plays an important part in occult work, and the person who cannot express his will and imagination through the fine muscles of the hands will seldom be able to perform the practical operations. The importance of manual work is well known among students of the occult. The range of information upon general subjects possessed by the adept is amazing. This is probably due to two causes. First, his trained mind endows him with a retentive memory and intellectual alertness. And secondly, light is thrown upon occultism from many unsuspected quarters, and a wide range of knowledge is necessary for its full apprehension. The physical powers of the trained occultist are remarkable, for he's able to influence many of the bodily faculties which are not usually under the control of his will. He's usually very sensitive to the influence of any drug and consequently needs reduced doses, and any of the anodynes which dull consciousness, such as bromide, must be used with great caution. On the other hand, he usually takes a general anesthetic exceptionally well, being without fear and accustomed to go in and out of his body. His control over his emotions reduces surgical shock to a minimum, and, owing to his access to the sources of energy, his recuperative powers are amazing. Among his immediate associates, and especially his pupils, the adept usually inspires the greatest devotion and affection, but on the rare occasions when he comes in contact with the outer world, he's often reckoned cold and forbidding. This aloofness is very characteristic of the occultist. His attitude towards life is so different from that of his companions, his ways of thought so alien from theirs that intercourse is rendered difficult and he takes refuge in silence to avoid misunderstanding. Many people are estranged from the occultist because love is not his outstanding characteristic. The difference between his attitude and that of the lover of humanity may be likened to the difference between the person who keeps animals as pets and the one who breeds them for show purposes. The latter sets out to bring the species to the highest degree of perfection of which it's capable. And with that end in view, he's ruthless with the individual. The standard of training in the higher degrees is very exacting and few achieve it. These few are those whom tradition regards as superhuman. But they're not superhuman. They're human beings developed to the highest pitch of which the human vehicle is capable. Such excellence of any walk of life is obtained only as the reward of arduous labors, and these leave their mark on the adept. He travels too fast for the average humanity, and they resent it. But of those souls who delight in great adventure, he's the chosen companion and beloved friend. Chapter 6. Daily Life Upon the Path. The rule of the path is not a written code that demands an outer conformity, but a dedication to an ideal, and involves self-discipline in order the ideal may be attained. Those who follow the path, whether they be leading a community life or following community ideals out in the world, learn certain spiritual principles which, as underlying cosmic laws, govern all things. No rules are made concerning the application of these principles to the affairs of life. Each student applies them to his own circumstances and problems according to his understanding. Counsel is not proffered unless it's asked, for until the need for guidance has been realized, guidance is seldom acceptable. It's of more value that a soul should learn that it should do the right thing. If the cosmic laws are obeyed, results are obtained. If they're disregarded, there follow the inevitable consequences of a broken natural law. The growth of a soul takes place through many incarnations, and different attainments are required of it at different stages of its development. Therefore, no objective standard of achievement is set. A principle is taught early, an ideal upheld, and each student is counseled to apply that principle and follow that ideal in the circumstances in which he finds himself. For it's only as he is faithful over few things that he will be entrusted with many. The principle is the same whether it be applied to the ordering of a cottage or a palace. And if that principle be realized and faithfully applied in the cottage, it can speedily be adapted to the palace. The person who makes a muddle on a small scale is hardly likely to succeed if entrusted with work on a large scale. The first principle to be learnt concerns the nature of the cosmic laws and their inviolability. Students must accept the concept of the absolute rule of law, that nothing is fortuitous, accidental, or incidental. Whatever happens is the result of a cause. Whatever is going to happen is also the result of a cause. Being aware of this law, the initiate never grumbles or repines, but accepts calmly and unresentfully whatever may befall him, knowing that nothing comes to him which is not his due. Acknowledging the justice of karma, he accepts the reactions of the past ungrudgingly. It's this serene and cheerful acceptance by which the initiate can always be known. His one care is to keep in tune with the cosmic harmony, and whether he bow his head to study his lesson or lift it to sing and rejoice, his face never loses its serenity. When reincarnation is held as a fact of experience, the attitude towards human problems differs profoundly from that which prevails when it's believed that all problems begin and end in this, the present life. The initiate may accept his lot with a calmness which amazes men, whose impulse it is to curse or pray according to their nature. But his acceptance does not necessarily imply passivity. To accept one's fate without murmuring does not pledge one to make no effort to better it. Knowing the power of concentrated thought, the initiate makes use of it in all the problems of life. His method, however, is not that of a direct attack in which he wills the change of an unpleasant condition, but is directed to bring about certain changes in his own consciousness, for he knows that it's his own temperament which is the real instrument of karma. It's only through those factors in his own nature which react that karma can affect him. He knows that certain conditions come to him so they may provoke certain reactions in his own nature, and according to his handling of these reactions will be his karma, even in the present life. While he's harmonized these reactions, he's worked out his karma. He knows, therefore, that although he cannot determine the conditions under which his life must be lived, he can determine his reaction to those conditions. It's the fact which he bears constantly in mind in all his dealings. It's this realization which enables him to raise his head above a sea of troubles and view them from the standpoint of cosmic law and spiritual principles. Although he cannot command the conditions to which he awakens from the sleep of birth, he's nevertheless the master of his fate, for he can manipulate those conditions in such a way that they shall bear him whithersoever he will, just as a ship can tack against a head wind. And the worse the conditions and the stronger the wind, the swifter his progress. The initiate is always revaluing things according to cosmic principles. He knows that his real life is lived in his higher self, the unit of evolution, and that his human personality is but a phase of his life, that his real existence is never immediately involved in it. From the experiences of this phase, he derives the food whereby his real self grows through the vast eons of evolutionary time. To him, it's his real self that matters, not his series of transitory personalities. And so he dares to take risks with his mundane prospects, which most men would not dare to take. Consequently, although he may not amass the things of this world, his life has a significance, a richness, and a freedom which are lacking to the man who dares not so adventure lest he lose his all. The initiate lives gloriously because he lives dangerously. Nevertheless, his risks are more apparent than real, as were the risks of Columbus, who staked his success on a mathematical hypothesis. He depended for his safety upon the truth of the theory that the earth was round. If, as most people believed, it was flat and at the world's end was the precipice of outer space, he would never return from his great adventure of sailing towards the west in order to reach the east. So it's with the initiate. He dares to trust his fate to an esoteric theory. If, as the average man believes, he's wrong, he's made ducks and drakes of his life. But if, as he believes, he's right, he will find the Indies. What's the testimony of experience on this point? How many men have served Mammon in his house of flesh have not recanted on their deathbeds? For when they come to die, they know that they have never lived. Yet the initiate goes to meet the king of terrors as to a crowning. For to him, death is not the end of the world, but the northwest passage.